Okay, picture this for a second. It's Friday night. You're at a party, or maybe, one of those mandatory networking things with the lukewarm white wine.
The worst.
The worst. Or you're just in a busy office break room. The room is loud. The energy's high. You're physically surrounded by people. Someone's laughing over here. Someone's handing you a drink.
You're in the middle of it.
You are in the thick of it.
Yeah.
You are socializing, but then you get this feeling. It's like this cold drop of water just sliding down your back. You look around at all these talking, laughing people, and you realize that you feel completely and utterly isolated.
Like you're watching the whole scene through a sheet of glass.
Yes, exactly. Through a sheet of glass.
That is such a jarring experience. It's that moment where the physical reality, being surrounded, just clashes so violently with the emotional reality, which is that you feel invisible. And honestly, it's way more common than most of us want to admit.
Oh, for sure. We think if we're lonely, it's because we're physically alone. But this is different.
It's totally different.
And that is exactly what we're digging into today. We're looking at this really compelling guide called Seen, Not Just Surrounded. Yeah. And I love that title because it hits on that paradox right away.
It does. You're surrounded by people, yet that connection, it just feels thin or distant or just missing.
The guy calls it high-functioning loner syndrome.
High-functioning loner, that's a great way to put it. Because being surrounded is just geography, right? It's proximity. I can sit next to a stranger on a bus and be surrounded. But being seen, that's connection.
Right.
And the source material we're looking at today, it frames this as a solvable problem. It's a mechanical breakdown in how we interact, not some, deep, dark defect in your soul.
Which is a huge relief because I think a lot of us feel like it is a defect. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear.
Yeah.
We want to take you from just occupying space near other humans to actually feeling seen. We're going to look at how this guide says we can reduce that emotional loneliness, create deeper connections, and here's the kicker, without having to perform.
Oh, that performance aspect is the absolute linchpin. We're going to spend a lot of time there.
Absolutely. So here's the roadmap. First, we'll unpack the diagnosis, why this happens, why we feel alone in a crowd. Then we'll switch gears into the how-to, this connection depth guide, and the self-expression exercises it lays out.
Because just be yourself is probably the worst advice you can give someone.
The worst. It's like telling someone who's drowning to just swim.
Exactly. We need the mechanics. We want to move you from, quantity of interactions to actual quality of connection.
Precisely. So let's start with the diagnosis. The source poses this really simple but heavy question. Why do I feel alone even with people around me?
It is the core pain point. And what's so fascinating is that the guide, it immediately tries to validate that feeling by just listing symptoms, because sometimes you feel off, but you don't really have the language for it.
You just think you're tired or something. Yeah, like a medical checklist for your social life. Let's run through these because I have a feeling a lot of you listening are going to be nodding along. The first one is that your conversations always stay surface level.
Ugh, the dreaded small talk loop. How are you? Good.
Busy. You're so busy. Crazy weather. I mean, it's functional. It signals I'm not a threat. But there are no nutrients in it. It's empty calories.
Social rice cakes. That's what it is. You can eat 1,000 of them and still starve to death.
That is a perfect image. And if you're doing that for 8 hours a day at work, at happy hour, you are chemically starving for connection.
Which leads directly to the second symptom the source points out. And I think this is the most insidious one. Social time leaves you feeling emptier instead of recharged.
This is such an important one to double click on. If you're an introvert, you might just think, well, people drain me. That's normal. But this source is pointing to something different.
It's not just about battery life. No. It's about the quality of the energy exchange. It's not just fatigue. It is emptiness. You spend 3 hours with friends and you walk away feeling like you have less inside you than when you started.
It's the difference between running a marathon and running on a hamster wheel.
Yes. A marathon is exhausting, but you feel accomplished. You went somewhere. The hamster wheel is just movement. You gave energy, you performed the rituals, you smiled, but you didn't get any genuine connection back. You are in a deficit.
You're all output, zero input, which culminates in that third symptom, the sensation of not being truly seen. People see your face, they hear your voice, but they aren't interacting with you.
They're interacting with a representative, your PR person.
Which brings us to the root cause. The source material says it's this one specific behavior. You hide parts of yourself to fit in.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. We often think loneliness is something that happens to us. Nobody called me, or I don't have enough friends.
Right.
But this guide suggests that this specific loneliness is a byproduct of a defense mechanism we are using. We're performing.
Performing. Okay, let's unpack that. Because I can hear someone listening right now saying, wait a minute, I'm not performing. I'm being polite. If I tell my boss his tie is ugly, I'm not being authentic. I'm getting fired.
And that is a critical distinction. The source isn't telling you to abandon all social intelligence. Performance in this context is curation that's driven by fear. It's when you suppress your actual personality, your real opinions, because you are afraid the real you just isn't acceptable.
So it's not about the ugly tie. It's about what then?
It's about the avatar. Think about that networking event again. When you walk in, do you bring your your worries about your sick dog, your weird obsession with 18th century pottery? Or do you bring a curated avatar that you think will be generally acceptable?
Oh, it's the avatar, 100%.
Yeah.
You smooth out all the edges. You laugh at jokes you don't think are funny. You nod when you disagree so you don't cause friction.
Right. And that is the performance. The source says we do this to fit in. But here's the absolute tragedy of that strategy. If you successfully fit in by hiding who you are, the people around you aren't connecting with you.
They're connecting with the performance, with the avatar.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, that hits hard. So even if they like you, even if you're the life of the party, you still feel lonely because you know they don't actually know the person behind the mask.
Precisely. You are surrounded, but the real you is hiding in a bunker inside your head, totally unseen. And that's why the source emphasizes that loneliness is not about the quantity of people.
Yeah, that was a key insight for me. The text explicitly says that.
You can have a full calendar, booked solid. But if you're performing at all of those events, you're going to be chronically lonely. It's not social isolation, it's emotional isolation. And frankly, it's almost worse.
Why do you say it's worse?
Because if you're sitting home alone on a Friday, you know why you're lonely. The data matches the feeling. I'm alone, therefore I feel lonely. But if you're at a party surrounded by friends and you feel lonely, you start to think something is broken inside you.
It creates shame. Look at all these friends I have. Why am I so miserable?
Exactly. The diagnosis here is you're miserable because you were working a second job, the job of being acceptable social person, and that job doesn't pay you in connection. It only pays you in safety.
That's a powerful way to frame it. Safety versus connection. You can be safe and hidden, or you can be seen and connected.
Yeah.
But it's hard to be both at the same time.
That's the trade-off.
So we've diagnosed the problem. It's not a lack of people. It's a lack of authenticity. It's the performance.
Yeah.
I want to spend the rest of our time on the solution. Because stop performing sounds terrifying.
It does.
The source material calls itself a connection depth guide plus self-expression exercises, which sounds a bit technical, but let's break down the practical steps.
The very first step it suggests is identifying where connection breaks down.
So this is like doing a post-game analysis on your social interactions.
Kind of. But you can also do it in real time. It's about becoming an observer of your own behavior. We call it the autopilot audit.
The autopilot audit. Okay, how do we run that?
You just have to catch yourself in the act of glossing over reality. The guide suggests looking at your interactions to see where they stop being real. For example, did you just agree with an opinion you actually hate? Did you smile when you actually felt annoyed?
Okay, so just noticing when you flinch away from honesty.
Yes. Let's take a concrete example. Someone asks, how's work going? And your instinct, your internal truth is, I am so stressed about this project, I feel like I'm drowning. But your filter, the avatar, kicks in and says, it's great, busy but good.
In that moment, that split second where you chose the safe lie over the messy truth, that is where the connection broke.
Exactly. You just severed the wire. You protected yourself, but you also guaranteed that the other person cannot support you, cannot understand you, and cannot connect with you. If you do that 10 times a day, you've missed 10 opportunities to be seen.
But isn't there a risk? If I say, I'm drowning, isn't that a lot?
Well, we'll get to the how of expressing that in a second, because there's a way to do it without being a burden. But first, we have to talk about the state of mind needed to even notice that moment. The source calls this learning emotional presence.
Emotional presence sounds a little bit like therapy speak. Can you ground that for us? What does that actually mean here?
Think of it like Wi-Fi. Physical presence is just having your device in the room. You're there. Your body's in the chair. But emotional presence is having your internal Wi-Fi turned on and actually connecting to the network.
I like that because we've all been with someone who is physically there, but their Wi-Fi is clearly off.
Or it's connected to a different network called worrying about how I look or planning what to say next. If all your bandwidth is tied up managing your image, no data can get through. Emotional presence means shifting your focus from how am I coming across to what's actually happening right now between us.
So getting out of your own head.
It is. It's just being available. You can't connect if you aren't home. If your lights are on but nobody's home because you're busy managing the avatar, connection is impossible.
Okay, so step 1 is the audit noticing when we fake it. Step 2 is turning on the Wi-Fi, getting out of our heads. But now we get to the really tricky part. The source brings up expressing yourself without oversharing.
Ah, yes. The nuance of vulnerability. This is where everyone gets stuck.
Right. Because when people hear stop performing, they panic. They think, does this mean I have to tell my barista about my childhood trauma?
Do I have to cry at the office holiday party? And the guide is very careful here. It's not about dumping everything on everyone. That's just another form of disconnection, actually. We call that the basement.
The basement.
If the avatar is the perfectly manicured front lawn where nothing is real, the basement is where you keep the skeletons, the deep trauma, the darkest stuff. You don't invite a stranger or even a casual friend straight into the basement. It's unsafe for you and overwhelming for them.
So what's the middle ground?
The porch.
The porch. I like this. Explain the porch.
The porch is where you can be real but appropriate. Expressing yourself just means letting your actual feelings and thoughts be known in a way that fits the context. It's the difference between saying, I'm fine, that's the lawn, and saying, honestly, I've had a bit of a rough week, so I'm a little low energy tonight, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, I see. Okay, that second one isn't oversharing. You're not sobbing, but it's true.
Right, and it gives the other person a handle to grab onto. If you say, I'm fine, the door is closed. Smooth surface, nothing to grip. If you say, I've had a rough week, you've opened the door just a crack. You haven't invited them into the basement, but you've let them onto the porch.
And that invites them to join you there. They might say, oh man, me too. This project has been a nightmare.
Exactly. And suddenly you're not performing, you're connecting. You're two humans acknowledging that life is hard instead of two avatars pretending it's perfect.
That seems so much more manageable. Just giving people a chance to see the real texture of your life, not just the polished surface.
And that ties directly into the next strategy in the guide, creating depth in existing relationships.
This one is encouraging because it suggests you don't have to go find a whole new group of deep friends.
Which is a huge relief. Often when we feel lonely, we blame the people around us. Oh, these people are shallow. I need deep philosophical friends. But the source argues the shallowness might be in the dynamic, not the people.
So you can change the dynamic with people you already know.
Absolutely. You're 50% of every interaction you're in. If you change your input, the output has to change. If you stop performing with your current friends, if you start practicing that porch-level honesty, the relationship will shift.
But is there a danger there? What if my friends like the avatar? What if they don't want the real me?
That is the risk. We have to be honest about that. Some people might be surprised. Some might even step back because they were comfortable with the performance. They liked the version of you that never had needs and always agreed.
That sounds painful.
It can be, but if someone only likes the performance, do you actually have a relationship with them? Or do you just have a contract?
Oof, a contract.
But here's the flip side, and this is what usually happens. When one person stops performing, it gives everyone else permission to relax. It's contagious. Vulnerability breeds vulnerability. You admit you're struggling, and suddenly your friend goes, oh, thank God, I thought I was the only one. And boom, you're seen, and they're seen.
That's like breaking the spell.
Exactly. You realize everyone else was in their own bunker, waiting for the signal that it was safe to come out.
So let's look at the payoff.
Yeah.
Because this takes effort. It takes courage to drop the act. If we do this work, if we do the audit, turn on the Wi-Fi, invite people onto the porch, what's the outcome?
The source lists three major ones. The first and most direct is reduced emotional loneliness.
Right back to that core pain. You stop feeling that ache of isolation even when you're with people.
Right, because the isolation came from the gap between who you are and who you show. When you close that gap, the loneliness just dissipates. You're congruent.
The second outcome listed is feeling understood without performing.
This is the freedom aspect. I mean, think about how much energy it takes to maintain a performance. To constantly monitor your words, your face, your tone, it is exhausting.
It's like holding a beach ball underwater.
Perfect analogy. The outcome here is relief. You just let the ball up. You get to just be, and in that state of being, you're understood. You realize you're lovable without the hustle.
That sounds like taking off a heavy backpack you didn't even realize you were wearing.
And that leads to the final outcome. deeper, more satisfying connections.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. You might realize you don't need to go to 3 parties a week. You might just need one really good conversation where you both actually say what you mean. That is infinitely more nourishing than 100 surface-level chats.
It really reframes the whole goal of social interaction. It's not about popularity, it's about resonance.
Resonance is the key word. You can't resonate with someone if you're wrapped in bubble wrap. You have to take the wrapping off.
So let's wrap this up. We started with that feeling of being alone in a crowd, surrounded but not seen. We figured out the culprit is often our own tendency to perform, to fit in the avatar. And we looked at the solution, noticing when we disconnect, learning to be emotionally present, and risking a little authentic self-expression, inviting people onto the porch.
It's a shift from how do I get people to like me to how do I let people see me?
And that's something you can apply literally anywhere. At work, with your partner, with your old college friends.
Even with the cashier at the grocery store. It's a way of being in the world. It's deciding that you are worth being seen and that connection is worth the risk of being real.
It's powerful stuff. Now, before we sign off, we'd like to leave you with something to chew on, something a little provocative.
Right. So we talked a lot about the performance today, and the source makes this big distinction between being surrounded and being seen. So here's a question to ask yourself. It's a bit of a haunting question, actually.
Okay, Donna.
If you stopped performing today, if you stopped hiding those parts of yourself just to fit in, if you stopped laughing at jokes you don't find funny and agreeing with things you don't believe, would the people around you still recognize you?
Oof. That gives me chills.
And here's the follow-up. If they wouldn't recognize you, are those the connections you actually want to keep?
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you so much for diving in with us today. Stop performing. Start connecting. We'll catch you on next Deep Dive.
See you then.